I think the award itself is really a recognition that corporate governance is not just about a compliance or regulatory driven agenda, but it's very much around the quality of the processes that you use to validate your corporate governance. So in terms of that, I think it's an important recognition that people are looking beyond the compliance side of corporate governance to something more substantive and in which you can validate the processes that assure the quality of your governance in a corporation. The second part of it is for my organisation, the Global Corporate Governance Forum. I think it's also, we work in mostly developing countries around the world. Somewhere around 85 countries are covered by us from time to time. But a lot of it is trying to integrate practices of corporate governance in the developing markets with those of the more developed markets in Western Europe and North America. And I think it's also a recognition that that gap, as we might call it, is increasingly narrowing, particularly given the crises we are seeing at the moment in Western Europe. I think the biggest challenge is one of resource and capacity. It falls into a couple of categories. I think firstly, in most of the developing countries and emerging markets, is trying to really, the historic basis of their business systems, their cultural sort of aspects of how they do business, their stage of market development, is such that the earlier aspects is really trying to understand the relevance of the standards to their business system, what the value of their corporate governance is to supporting effective corporate enterprise. A lot of them have actually moved increasingly beyond that. You know, as countries such as China and Russia and India and Brazil, the BRICS have moved into the mainstream of the global economy. In many ways, it's not so much that they question the standards, but really looking at how these more Western-style standards suit their particular business environment, and then looking how to adapt that into their environment. So it's more about how you recognize these standards as the general principle, conventional principle, and then looking at how you structure that into your particular market. Because one of the major misconceptions that we confront is fundamentally is that we look at Western Europe and North America, they're largely homogeneous in many ways, in the most general terms, in terms of their corporate practices. When you move into emerging markets, you've got everything from a way a corporation is run in Vietnam, to a way a corporation might be run in a very small, highly indebted country in Africa, to an emerging giant such as Brazil. All very different, very circumstantial. And it's really about how to model and respond to that. Quality is really about the substantive part of corporate governance. It's not just about making sure that you have a nice report which sort of shows you to have complied with a whole bunch of standards that are either in some form of regulation or code or law, to something which is really about how the board really looks at corporate governance as a value-added principle of its business proposition. It's part of its strategic definition, it's part of its operational oversight, and it's really about ensuring that the board remains engaged with the business in terms of ensuring that the information it gets from the operations and from management is information which can be relied upon, which is reliable in itself, and is information on which good decisions can be made. That's the first part. The second part is really then monitoring the processes, the policies and decisions that take place in the board. What is really fundamental to the effective governance of any corporation is how those policies and standards are implemented and deployed within the corporation. And quality assurance really sets around those issues, around ensuring that you've got the processes that are appropriate to your business, rather than just some one-size-fits-all compliance type approach that satisfies perhaps some regulatory provision to something that is really very much part of your business DNA. I'm a pragmatist, and for that reason I say it's more evolutionary. I think we're learning all the time. Every crisis teaches us something else. You know, we always think we've got it fixed at the next crisis, and then we find there's something else that hasn't been fixed. So I think it's a process. I don't think I doubt we'll ever get to an end state, and I say that simply because Business is an emerging thing. There's new technologies, there's new markets, there's new competitors, there's new economies emerging all the time, new products, and governance is the same thing. It has to respond very much to all of these developments. And as you move into the recent launch of Facebook on NASDAQ, for example, is to my mind a case in point. It's a very different type of corporation to the General Electrics and the General Motors and what have you. So I think it's evolutionary. I think you're going to find, as boards move into the next generation of people who are very accustomed to technology, they're going to look at how they communicate differently, how they think about business decisions differently, and how technology is going to have a very fundamental part of how your business is run, how you understand your business. So I think it's a process. The challenge for boards is to understand that and to try and be at least with the game, if not ahead of the game, rather than playing the catch-up that we find ourselves doing so often.